Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Gloria McLennan, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Our webinar topic today is the evolution of technology within the talent space. And today's webinar is hosted by VeriKlick. So before we begin the webinar today, just a couple of housekeeping items for everyone. These are your instructions as to how to adjust your audio during the webinar, and all attendees will be on mute throughout the webinar. Next, these are your instructions for submitting a question in the Q&A section, and please feel free to post your questions at any time during the webinar. Now, I'd like to begin the webinar by introducing our featured host and guest panelist. So our fabulous host today is Monique Bergener, who is our Senior Director, MSP and VMS Client Management at VeriKlick. And our amazing guest panelist today is Ray Culver, Founder and Principal for CWF Solutions Group. So welcome everyone to our August webinar. Next, let me share a little bit about our guest today, Ray Culver. Ray is the founder and principal for CWF Solutions Group. Ray's a staffing industry veteran and a certified contingent workforce professional. Congratulations, Ray, with 25 years plus of experience in sales, sales strategy, and sales leadership. Ray serves as a subject matter expert, and he helps staffing firms and HR technology platforms develop go-to-market sales strategies, both pre and post-revenue stage organizations, both in the US and Europe. And prior to entering the consulting space, Ray held leadership roles with Scout Exchange, Randstad North America, and Manpower Group North America, where he was instrumental in creating and leading national and global MSP sales channels. Ray is involved with many multiple nonprofit organizations throughout Southern California and serves as a strategic advisor with several startups throughout the US. You know, we are excited to have Ray with us today. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you so much. Thanks for letting me come on to the webinar. I'm excited.
Our pleasure. Now, let's begin the webinar. The evolution of technology within the talent space. And Monique, I will turn this over to you to begin the lively discussion.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I appreciate your time and effort. And Ray, welcome. So proud to be presenting with you today. This is very exciting. And of course, it's a topic that we're both very passionate about. So I'm excited to see, to better understand the questions that we have from our studio audience and what we can do. But let's get started. The evolution of the vendor management systems, it's a broad topic. There's so many things that we can discuss. But what I'd like to know, in your opinion, let's talk about integrated partners within the VMS platform and perhaps your experience with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you all for having me on the webinar today. When we look at, and I agree with you, this is like a topic that I think we can both talk about all day long. But when we look at kind of the evolution of VMS and you look at how they have they've been doing it, but building out kind of these ecosystems and building out partnerships and integrations to where they can get away from just being a transactional based piece of technology, which in the early days, that's what it was. If you look at, we'll take SAP Fieldglass, for instance. They have a very strong, very robust digital marketplace where you really can plug all sorts of different technology partners into your program. So whether it's background check providers, whether it is direct sourcing platforms, whether it is marketplaces, you have all these options. The other legacy, global player Beeline, they also have the same type of ecosystem, very robust. And Monique, I think VeriKlick is a part of Beeline's ecosystem. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. We're proud to say that we're Beeline partners and we're integrated to support external clients of Beeline. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Yeah, and then also, talking about, obviously you have your global, your legacies, and when you look at, when I say smaller, they're certainly they're a little larger in their own right, but you look at some of the other players who have either come up in the market over the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, or you look at some of the brand new players who are coming up. They are developing out those ecosystems as well. And several of them are trying to really differentiate themselves out of the box by not necessarily calling themselves a VMS, but calling themselves more of a marketplace. So not only can you have your traditional supply base, you can have access to, multiple marketplaces, you can have access to direct sourcing partners and things like that. So I think you're starting to see even the ecosystems evolve a bit and new players coming out of the box with, or at least trying to have these ecosystems already built.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do see a question that came about just now. Let me see. In your experience, Ray, what have you seen as some of the most common types of integrated partners?
I think, again, within some of your legacy large global platforms, you see really the whole, candidate or gig ecosystem. When I say that, I'm thinking back to, candidate experience and onboarding and background checks and things like that. So those are some of the more common ones. These days, you are seeing more and more integrations with, again, like direct sourcing partners and talent marketplaces, and really focusing on what is most important to the client. Yes, it is to have that transaction-based platform because that's at the core. That's what it is. It's keeping up with the entire contingent workforce. But how do you get access to additional talent channels? How do you get access to talent wide and far? And that's where I think you're seeing more and more. It's becoming more and more common that you're having these different types of marketplaces integrated in with the VMS partner.
Interesting. And I'm sure we'll continue on that as well. But let's talk about the development, Ray, of ecosystems within the VMS platforms. How have you seen that evolve and change, particularly over the past year?
Yeah, I would say, again, the ecosystem seem to be getting much wider, obviously. You're seeing more and more of your up and coming marketplaces, and I keep going back to that just because I know that's our second column, but I could geek out on marketplaces all day long. But you keep seeing these different types of marketplaces come up within the space, whether it's talent, whether it is recruitment, whether it's focusing on international borderless talent. So there's all types of different marketplaces, and you're seeing them kind of help to evolve those ecosystems. I think, as I mentioned earlier, you're also seeing brand new entries into the VMS game who are coming out of the gate focusing on having these very deep ecosystems and integrations. You're seeing a lot of stuff, within the European markets, who are combining, VMS, ATS, FMS, all sorts of different platforms into one. You're also seeing a lot of the VMSs of today who are really focusing on integrating with ATSs. So you see a lot out there around, Workday. So integrating with Workday, you're seeing that a lot more and more.
Interesting. Yes, I agree. There are a lot of different flavors, which I'll know we'll get into a little bit later. However, it has changed dramatically over this past year and over the last couple of years in particular. But it's exciting to see where ecosystems and partnerships with VMS platforms are going. I agree. I do see we have a question. VMS systems have continued to evolve quite quickly. What do you think will be the next evolution of VMS systems? That's a fabulous question, and I think it's a loaded question, but I think it's fabulous, though.
Yeah, that's a great question. We need to have some of the VMS gurus on this call, and let them kind of talk about it. But in my humble opinion, I think you'll continue to see the VMSs who are in market today continue to evolve. And when I say that, I mean that sounds like such an easy kind of answer back to that incredible question. but I think you'll see them continue to listen to kind of the voice of the customer.
Right.
Again, historically, back in the day, VMSs were very transaction based. I think they were very reliant upon other partners within the space. So, if you're going to have a VMS, you had to have additional partners. And I think you're starting to see some models and some things come around to say, the VMS can do so much these days that it doesn't necessarily have to have all the partners that it had to have in the past to make it viable. So again, voice of the customer, I think is going to be huge. I think you'll continue to see the integrations get deeper and really more complex. I can tell you from some of the platforms that I've worked with, really focusing on, again, how do I give my end client access to every talent channel possible that they want. Obviously they have to say yes for it and kind of opt in, but how do I give them access to their traditional supply base, which has never gone away. That's super important. But also, how do I give them access to talent marketplaces? How do I give them access to recruitment marketplaces? And that type of thing. So building out those solutions, I think is going to continue to be, you're going to see the VMS do that.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Yeah. And that takes us into marketplaces as a talent channel or as a supplier. Let's talk about the talent and recruitment marketplaces, Ray. What are your thoughts and opinions with this topic, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, like I said, this is kind of an area I could totally just geek out on. So,
yeah,
from a talent marketplace, I think it's interesting because you're seeing, you see talent marketplaces who could also be classified as kind of online staffing, because they handle the entire, they handle not only building out the communities and finding the talent, things like that, but they also handle kind of the backside of the staffing, paying and things like that, paying the contractor and taking care of the payroll. You also see talent marketplaces who have, they want to be pure tech, like they want to be, the technology that helps to build out the communities and brings the talent together with the end client. And in situations like that, you see talent marketplaces who have partnered or are partnering with maybe an EOR or an AOR provider. So again, you're starting to kind of stack different aspects of our industry together to make one solution work. So that, again, the talent marketplaces, I think you'll continue to see them grow and pop up. You're seeing talent marketplaces pop up around, different things, diversity and inclusion. I think there's Matheson, I think, is one that's really hyper-focused on diverse candidate type engagements. And they've developed out, a way to partner with community organizations to bring talent in. You see some that are focused on veterans, putting veterans back to work, which I think is just incredible. You see ones like the Mom Project, who's focusing on. So you're seeing them come up and really hyper focus on certain things, which is exciting.
It is exciting, and I like the fact that you've mentioned supporting the veterans and returning to work mothers and parents, I should say. I don't want to limit it to just moms alone, but returning to work, individuals and across the board in general, just and with diversity. We do have several questions here for you, Ray. Let me start with the next one. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges that a company faces when trying to decide on a talent or recruitment marketplace, since there are so many choices? That's a great question.
That is a great question. I'm going to go back to kind of the way we opened the call. If the ecosystem is big enough, if you were to have, if you have the VMS in place and you're trying to figure out, hey, there's so many talent recruitment marketplaces out there. Who do we go with? Well, if you have a VMS partner who has a large ecosystem, why limit yourself to one? You know what I mean? I mean that if you can bring multiple marketplaces into your platform, that gives you access to a lot of different channels of talent. So, that would be my first answer to that.
So you're
I
suggesting
think that's also
integrate multiple marketplaces or multiple
yes,
technologies? Is that what you're saying?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
okay.
if your VMS provider has a big enough ecosystem, why couldn't you plug in 2 talent marketplaces? Why couldn't you plug in, 2 recruitment marketplaces? So your requisitions are going to drop from, your hiring manager who built it out, or MSP partner, or whoever. It's going to drop into the VMS, and then through that integration, it's going to drop down to whoever the partner is. So why wouldn't you, pick a few? Maybe, if you wanted to pick, several of the ones that I mentioned that were focusing on certain talent, why not partner with all of them? I think
Right.
if you don't have a VMS in place, or some kind of a platform that's going to kind of tie it all together, then I think it really is important to probably have internal conversations to understand, what type of talent are we looking for? Because there are marketplaces out there that focus on certain types of, hard to find skill sets or talents or sectors or whatever. Are we open to this whole remote first thing that's come up, and working from home, working remote? Are we open to looking at, the whole borderless talent, and looking at, talent who maybe doesn't live in the city, doesn't live in the state, maybe lives, outside of North America? So I think a lot of it's just internal conversations to understand. And then when you finally do get to the evaluation process, I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, like a tech evaluation is very different than trying to figure out, who do we want to work with.
Interesting. Well, I have a follow-up on that, on the question that you just responded to, Ray. How does a client or a supplier determine which of these technologies would be the best for their business?
Again, I kind of go back to a little bit of the last answer. I think it depends on what type of talent are you, like how do you plan to use these different marketplaces? Is it across your entire enterprise? You know what I mean? So in other words, is it for everything from, the front desk, director of first impressions, all the way up to, if you need to hire someone within a C-suite? I mean, how do you plan to leverage this type of thing? And then if there are certain skill sets or places within your organization that you're going to use marketplaces for, then looking to see, okay, which ones specialize maybe in the talent that I'm looking for. And you can align that way. Or you can align to the different, like we talked about earlier, the different ways to, diversity and inclusion.
Right. So essentially what you're suggesting is that technology helps to select and identify the best marketplaces. Is that correct?
If you have that technology in place. If not, I mean, you're just going to go to market, and evaluate the different marketplaces that are out there. I think at that point, you can kind of, again, just look at them and understand what is their specialization within finding talent. Do they have one, or are they just a very general skills marketplace? What areas do they cover from a geo perspective? So, that would be part of the evaluation. From a tech evaluation perspective, I think a lot of it would be around ease of use. I think a lot of it would be around the user experience on both the end client side, so the hiring leader, as well as the candidate side. I think that a good marketplace has a good user experience for both. I think if either one of those and this is my opinion totally, so let me state that.
Understood.
If either one of those components have a difficult user experience, or kind of the interface, that would make it hard for me, because you want everybody to have a good experience. You want everybody to feel like it's easy to work with, ABC company So I think that's something that's important when you're doing evaluation.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I appreciate that explanation and so forth. So let's talk about the explosion of talent technology, Ray. There are, in fact, so many different flavors of technology, so many different options. I mean, we could literally talk for weeks at a time, on this topic. But let's just highlight a little bit. Let's talk about the flavors of technology. In your opinion, where do they stand? What are they offering? What do you think?
And that's a huge question, kind of just saying talent technology. There's so many. I go back to when I started my career, 27 years ago with Randstad. They had just entered the U.S. So they had just bought their first company in Atlanta. And so they were just really new to the North American market. And I don't think we didn't even have email addresses.
Yeah, we might not have.
That was, yeah. So that was 27 years ago. So you had your business card, but there wasn't an email. So to think about that, and to think about how far we've come, and to think about all the different technology options and flavors and just everything that we have today, and all the stuff that's upcoming. I mean, I think I remember I heard first quarter of this year was either first or second quarter was the largest investment in HR tech from startup and VC money ever. So, I mean, when you think about that, I mean, that's just amazing.
Right.
To get back to your question, some of the up and coming, and we, I know that we're going to talk about this a good bit, but, one of the big up and coming is sourcing. The whole direct sourcing platforms and solutions, and what does that entail? I think a lot of the way you can look at that and understand that it's really gaining momentum is that you're seeing a lot of enterprise, so a lot of end client going out to RFP for direct sourcing solutions. So they're putting these RFIs and RFPs and things out themselves, possibly working through advisors, but still, I mean, they're going to market themselves to understand it and see what's out there. Now, will they probably bring it into their existing contingent workforce program? Probably, potentially, but still, they're going out. And so to me, that tells the market that there is a tremendous amount of interest in direct sourcing.
Absolutely, and I have to agree. I mean, even speaking on behalf of VeriKlick and our direct sourcing technology, VeriSource, the need is there, the interest is there, and it's becoming such more of a commonly used term, concept, process, idea, need, where even a year ago, 2 years ago, we were a little bit vague as to what it really meant. So I agree with you 100%. So, we're experiencing it ourselves. But I do have a question from a participant. The pace of technology change accelerates, and new entrants to the HR technology space have begun to disrupt the market. Which technology do you think has been the most impactful disruptor? Wow, I like that question.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think there's a couple of different ways you could answer that. One is if you're talking about the very traditional kind of contingent workforce space. So you have, we'll put forth the whole kind of equation. So you have your MSP partner, you have your VMS partner, and traditionally you have your supply base. When the program is stood up, you're going to bring your existing supply base in, and over time, hopefully you'll begin to take that down based upon people who aren't performing. So that's your traditional. With the entry of all of these marketplaces, whether it's talent or recruitment, you're disrupting that traditional scenario, that equation. Mm-hmm. Because what you're saying to the end client is, hey, Mr. or Ms. end client, not only now do you have access to your traditional supply base, which again is very important, very, very, very important, but you have access to these other avenues to find talent. So I think it is a huge disruption. I think you'll continue to see a lot of disruption within that area as the marketplaces and direct sourcing and stuff continues to really continues to embed into that contingent program. You'll see a lot more disruption there. I know that there are programs who have gone from, I'm making this up, but let's say 100% supplier found talent, and they've gone to almost the opposite way. So it's like 70% talent from, say, direct sourcing. So I mean, that's a huge disruption. I mean, that's if you're a staffing supplier or if you're like an owner operator, that's a huge disruption.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one area. I also think, from a disruption perspective, the way that companies have always found talent, again, as far as, looking, if I'm talent acquisition for a large company and I sit in the Bay Area, and traditionally I've had to find either talent in the Bay Area or I've had to find talent so I can relocate. And now with, even what's happened over the last year and a half with COVID, now a disruptor is, well, I don't have to necessarily look in the Bay Area. I can look in Southern California. I can look in the Northeast.
Correct.
I can look in Canada. So to me, that's a huge disruption as well, because that's going to change the way that talent acquisition and contingent workforce, how people can locate talent. So,
and interestingly enough,
technology is pushing all of that.
Right.
Everything is being really pushed and fueled by technology.
I agree with you. And interesting enough, up until a couple of years ago, we really didn't consider that. We didn't consider bringing people in from another location. We looked at remote opportunities, but not as much as we do now, or we have over the last year for obvious reasons. However, now that we're getting back into the swing of things, so we feel, we're also finding that a lot of our clients, they feel that it's okay to be remote. It's okay to look at talent from another location. Do they travel into the office periodically? Perhaps, but it's definitely opening some doors, and it's very interesting to see how we're moving forward. So I like your view on that question very much.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think, again, the biggest disruption, and I think this goes back to me, being kind of this marketplace dork. The biggest disruption, I think, is around marketplaces, because I just think that's a whole new way of really finding different types of talent, and that'll continue to be a disruptor in space.
Fabulous. Yeah, I agree. Curation and technology. So, here's another buzzword. We talk about curation. Again, not everybody has, the same thoughts as to what it is. I don't know that it's fully defined, but let's talk about curation and technology and how you feel that it's impacting technology and so forth.
And I'll probably turn the question back on you as well, because I know that y'all do a lot of this from a technology perspective as well. But when I think of curation and tech, I think of, okay, so you have a direct sourcing platform who, whether, it's layering on top of a career site, whether it's, however, it's getting the profiles into the platform. You're building these large pools of potential talent, profiles, things like that. Who is, and the computer, the machine can do so much, but like, who is really working with those pools of talent to make sure that they're, really available, still warm, interested, who's bringing kind of the top talent out of those pools to maybe present to a hiring leader when the hiring leader says, hey, I want to go the direct sourcing route versus my traditional supply base or versus marketplaces. So to me, that's where, curation, you have to have that human element curating the talent that's being put into these pools, however they're getting in there, however the profiles are getting in there. I think it's going to be interesting to see, and I think you and I were talking about this. It's going to be interesting to see, with the advancement of technology and the machine doing more and more and more, how does the machine continue to kind of pick up some of those curation responsibilities? And is there a way in time to get to the point where the tech is really doing all of it?
Right.
I don't know. What do you think about that? Because again, y'all, I know that this is an area that y'all play in from a tech perspective. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, obviously curation. It's having the need, meeting the individuals after, identifying and hiring and getting folks started and using a broader range of scopes in order to do so. I do feel that this is an integral part of direct sourcing, recruiting, the new way of life at this point. It's very important. And again, we could talk for hours about this. However, I think that it needs to continue forward. It's very important, Ray. But I don't want to lose sight that we do have a question that I'd like to share with you.
Cool.
For purposes of time, obviously, I want to respect that we have an audience with questions. Do you think that along with many talent solutions, where definitions are continuously evolving, that curating talent is another solution that has many different definitions or approaches? And do you think that this is universally understood and what it means to curate talent? So this essentially tags on to what I was saying earlier, where direct sourcing was once a term used where we didn't really have an exact focal point of what direct sourcing meant at that time. Curation is a similar term nowadays.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because, we know it, I know what it means, you know what it means, at least in our industry and how we use it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think going back to the questions that were asked, because it was kind of a two-part question, I think
Yes.
To answer the questions, yes and no. So I think going in line of how the questions were asked, yes and no. Do I think that there is an absolute, definite definition and understanding and just kind of across the board of what curation is and means? No. Do I think that there's a lot of flavors out there and a lot of folks who will either go the very standard route of curation, which is what I think I mentioned and you mentioned. To me, that's a pretty standard type of definition of what you're doing and how you're curating the talent pools. But do I think it will continue to evolve? Yes. And I think you even see that when you look at who's doing the curation today. If you have a direct sourcing platform, does that company have a curation component that's going to be, probably human influence? It's going to be someone doing it. Is the curation aspect, is it a staffing provider who kind of layers in? Is it an MSP partner? Because I know you're seeing more and more MSP partners and organizations who are, I think they either have a lot of interest or have more interest in that curation component today. I would think that that's probably because you're seeing more and more direct sourcing come into programs. So of course, as more and more comes in, it's probably going to make your ears perk up as to the curation piece. So yeah, I don't think there is a standard definition. I do think it will continue to evolve over time. I think that answers the question.
I agree. I think that's a fabulous response, Ray. To tag on to that question, do you feel, in your opinion, that this is being utilized, curation, I should say, is being utilized more so from an enterprise standpoint, an MSP standpoint, or even from a staffing perspective as a recruiting functionality?
Well, usually there's dollars attached to curation. You know what I mean? There's a cost for curation. It's not free. So, I mean, if you are, whether you're an MSP partner, whether you're a staffing organization, whether you're an enterprise and maybe you're doing a cost save, but I mean, there's some percentage that's attached to that. So if I'm a business owner and I own a staffing organization, that could be a revenue stream for me to really go out and say, I am good at curation, whatever that means, and that's a new revenue stream or a revenue stream that I can kind of increase or pick up, that type of thing. Same thing goes for the MSP partner. If I'm a client, then that could be a cost save, because I'm not necessarily having to include it at the level if I paid it out to a third party.
Right, because what I've seen is that more MSP programs are initiating direct sourcing, grading. They're initiating additional facets from within the program and what they offer to the end clients nowadays more so than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree 100%, and I think there's a lot of drivers for that. I mean, if you are an MSP partner and you have had a program for many years, so I mean, you've gone through your typical, we're going to possibly save you money, we're going to do risk mitigation, we're going to do compliance, we're going to do all these things. If you've kind of gone through the different phases of kind of how you can help that company to right size and evolve their contingent workforce, again, we go back to direct sourcing is very hot these days. So you have the client who's hearing a lot about it, whether it's through conferences or kind of just industry organizations. So that's a very innovative thing to bring into your program. So if I'm the MSP partner and I can initiate that, that's helping me to bring innovation into my program and bring it to the client before they hear, and possibly bring it to me. So I'm not surprised at all. I think you'll continue to see that.
Right.
I would, and I say this very carefully, but a couple of years ago, and I heard this from multiple MSP partners. So this isn't something that just one said, but I think a lot of MSPs were kind of struggling with where does direct sourcing fit within the program. So, again, it's one of those where you learn and you adapt to embrace it. And again, figure out where does it fit in the program. How do I take this to my client? How do I use this as something that makes me very innovative? And potentially, how do I make a bit more than my traditional MSP fee if I can pull the teams and the bandwidth together to handle the curation piece? So it's a win-win for everybody.
I agree.
As long as you can figure out how to do it. Yep.
True, and it'd be great if we all do it the same way, but there's obviously different flavors as we've discussed already. So I'd like to talk about verification and technology. Obviously, this is very, very close to what I live and breathe within VeriKlick and so forth. We are very proud of what we are able to do and provide with verification within our technology and more. However, I'd like for you to open the door and have a conversation about this based on what you've seen, your experience, and your thoughts.
Yeah, this is an interesting, I think, topic. I mean, this definitely, you're hearing more and more these days about, I heard it from a client that I'm working with on a project, but, how one of their end clients wanted some type of verification that the candidate who was being presented was actually the candidate who was going to interview, because I guess there had been a lot of candidates being presented, but that's not who interviewed, or candidates interviewing, but that's not who actually started the job. So I've heard a lot about this lately. I know that there's a lot going on around like voice verification and things like that. I think you and I were talking about, again, back in the days with Ronstar back in 1996, and me being with the Atlanta Olympic Games, but we used a lot of like biometric and facial kind of recognition that was built into our badging. So I
Mhm.
wonder if it'll get to that point where, it's an even expanded verification over time. What do you think? Because I mean, given that y'all do this a lot, what are you seeing coming up in the
Yeah,
market and happening?
it's much, much more relevant now than it used to be. I mean, I've been in the industry for many years as well, and I can remember days where we never really figured out, we couldn't understand why the person didn't, that we handed the assets to on the first day of work. They
Yeah,
weren't quite grasping the jokes that we talked about, or, discussing past conversations. We're like, oh, the person's nervous. Our first day, oh, we'll give them a break, right? We never really thought much about it. We're like, oh, we'll just give them a chance, only to find out that they weren't grasping the opportunity properly. They were confused, problems, needed help, mentorship, and so on and so forth. And before you know it, then they're being replaced. All of these things happen, but we could never really put our finger on it, right? However, other than the days that we did see somebody talk on a video camera, their
yeah,
mouth moved, but the voice was clearly coming from someplace else. uh, you know, we've we've all had these experiences at some point or another in different shapes and sizes. However, nowadays, at least the last 5 years, things have changed. There's more opportunity for video interviewing. However, in this last year in particular, not only video interviewing, but video work. I mean, day-to-day work where you need to be on camera, you need to be, communicating with your teams and so forth. I feel very strongly that it's important to be able to determine that the people that you're working with are who they say they are, whether it's through video, voice recognition, facial, ID verification, whichever it is, it's imperative nowadays.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
more and more people will work for you at some point or a time that you'll never physically shake their hand. And that's the reality.
yeah,
So if you're
yeah,
never going to shake a team member or an employee's or a leader's hand, but you're going to work for them and get paid by them, then you need to be able to have yourself be verified in some way, shape, or form. You can't hide,
yeah,
because then you have to produce. So
yeah.
I think it's
Oh,
imperative
yeah,
that the technology is there.
yeah. No, I agree, and I think you're seeing more and more. You mentioned a lot of like video interviewing and meetings and things like that. I think probably everybody on this call and everybody almost around the world feels like they've lived on Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts or whatever for the last year and a half. But that has
Right.
become such just a way of life that, I mean, it's almost common to be able to do video interviews and things like that. So it's interesting that you bring that up. The one thing I would ask, I mean, like, how does this is probably a bigger topic for a different day, but when you start to bring in maybe on talent marketplaces, so you start to bring in clips of folks who are doing video introductions and things like that. Like, how do you ensure? And I would need to think through this, but I want to throw it out there. Like, how do you ensure things like that and not you kind of take the bias or anything out of like the hiring process?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know a lot where places are inserting video and stuff. I mean, that's a question I've heard is like, okay, but that's great, but how do you, how are you making sure that that's not, I don't know, just something to think about.
It's a loaded question. However, I will say this: whether it's, an organization really should hire the right candidate based on their
Right,
qualifications. It really should not have to do with whether it's
right,
gender,
yep,
anything,
yeah,
location, background. It really shouldn't have anything to do with that. However, it does exist, and we know that exists.
yeah,
But at
yeah,
the end of the day, and that is truly a separate conversation that we could go on. But
yeah,
but
totally,
to stay with the technology and the verification, I mean, whether it's video interviewing, the voice mapping, the tech assessments, watching, being able to determine if it's the same individual taking that test, personality assessments, however you wish to do it. I think that that's really the most important factor. You find the right candidate, ensure that they are who they say they are, and then let them do their job when you put them to work. That's really what it comes down to. I do have 2 questions here that have come in from our audience, if I may. When we consider all of the many options of different technology solutions to engage, which types of options, in your opinion, are a critical part of a program to engage the right talent? Oh, that's a great question.
That is a good question. I think it does. I mean, it goes back to finding the right talent for the needs that your organization has. So I think a lot of it ties back to, making sure that whatever tech partners, talent is extremely important. You have to identify it before you can move it, move talent down through the process. And making sure that your tech partners have some level of specialization, or have, something where, you're not just putting a rec in and kind of throwing almost something against the wall and hoping that something comes back. So I think a lot of it does depend on identifying the technologies who can identify the talent and can help you with your specializations.
Okay.
Because again, you kind of have to find the talent before you can begin to move them through the process.
I agree, absolutely, and it's identifying the talent, which all of these prior steps will be able to focus on, but it's verifying the talent once you have them.
Right.
We have another question. Obviously, I would like to think that VeriKlick is one of the top solutions. However, let's ask the question regardless. Which types of technology solutions are in the top 3 that are the most critical to support determining the final hiring decision, in your opinion, Ray?
Oh gosh, I think you mentioned VeriKlick. I mean, yes, I think that the whole verification and things like that is very important, especially in today's world, because it's only going to get cloudier and cloudier as far as, the way that making sure that the talent that you talk to is the talent that's actually you're bringing on board. I think expanding upon that, I think a lot of the assessment platforms, I think a lot of the kind of the onboarding platforms, I think those are super important. Candidates need to have a good onboarding experience. I go back to, talking about marketplaces and different UI, UX. I think a candidate, they're seeing your company as they're onboarding, or they're kind of going through the process. And if it's all online, if it's a clunky process, if it's not a good workflow, smooth, easy, they see that as your company.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's very, very important as you're evaluating technology. But yeah, I think the onboarding, I think the assessments, and of course the verification.
Great. And then I have a question. Okay. What do you think that all of these areas may change the way or impact the way you work with end clients, and how you might potentially reposition yourself within the market? Technology changes, Ray. Things are different. Every day we have something new to tackle. And you're connecting with a vast number of organizations of different shapes and sizes with different needs across the globe. How do you evolve and change with your conversations?
I think a lot of it has to do with, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I have a client who is in Europe, and we communicate very regularly via video type things, or text and things like that. So I mean, just because we're 6, 7, 8 hours apart, you would never know that. Calls late at night, calls early in the morning, all those sort of things, you adapt. You do what you have to do. But I think making sure that you're very knowledgeable on what's going on in the different regions, and that type of thing, and staying up on technology. I mean, if you look at some of the things that are big here in the U.S., they've been fairly standard in European markets for a bit of time. So again, just making sure that you're staying on top of things and making sure that whoever we're talking about, making sure that you're very aware of the different types of technologies and where they're at within the world. Because there are several marketplaces in Australia doing amazing things, absolutely amazing, phenomenal things. Do I think we'll see them in North America? Yes. Because again, they're great at what they do. They have good vision. They have good leadership. There are other video interviewing, type of platforms again that are in Australia. We'll see them, I think so as well. So I think just staying on top of all the technologies, all the up and comers, who's coming into the market, is key.
Right, and not only that, but being aware of the technologies that are available and most associated to that particular region, location, country, need, and so forth. So that even takes it a little bit further, doesn't it?
It does, and I mean, there are things that you can do, in certain areas and certain regions, and there are things that you can't do, or you really have to think through before you do them. Going back to the whole borderless talent, labor mobility and that type of thing. Where can you move talent from, what country to what country, and what type of, immigration and visas and things like that. There are technologies out there who handle all that for you.
Right.
So it's if that's a part of your growth within your organization, is to look at that type of talent. There are recruitment marketplaces out there who will, you put in what it is you're looking for from a talent perspective. They're going to tell you the top 3 to 5 markets where you should be looking for talent. And then they're going to help you from an immigration perspective to make sure that everything is applied for and things like that. So, yeah, I agree.
Interesting. Well, Ray, this has been a fabulous conversation. I'm so privileged to be able to work with you, speak with you, and share your wealth of information and knowledge with our participants. So thank you very, very much. This has just been an amazing event. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Gloria.
Oh, thank you, Monique. Thank you, Ray. My goodness. Well, what a really good discussion. You covered so many great topics in broad landscape, right? The evolution of HR technology just continues to be evolving in all the solutions, and it really gets more exciting across all the aspects of the solutions. And it almost seems like it's day-to-day change. So all really good, exciting topics. Ray, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your expertise, and your thoughts for the future with our team and our attendees. And of course, a sincere and special thank you to Monique, our fabulous host today, for guiding us through the discussion. And a very special thank you again, Ray, as our guest panelist today. Really appreciate you having you with us and being a part of this. And I hope that everyone enjoyed today's topic discussion. And thank you for attending and participating today. All of the attendees will receive a survey at the conclusion of the webinar, and we'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and provide us with your valuable feedback. And a special thank you to all of us, to everyone for joining the webinar today. My name is Gloria McClendon, and on behalf of VeriKlick and our guest today, Ray Culver, thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.